Welcome to our channel, Crime Loom, the place where true crime stories come alive. From daring jewel heists to mysterious legends, every video uncovers the secrets hidden in the shadows. Stay with us, because here, every crime tells a story. In every small town, there are nights that seem ordinary. Parents head out, children fall asleep, and a babysitter keeps watch. For Allison Parker, it was supposed to be one of those nights. But then the phone rang. On the other end wasn't a friend or a parent, but a whisper, soft, cold, and terrifying. It asked one chilling question. "Have you checked the children?" From that moment, fear took hold. The calls kept coming. The voice grew darker, and soon Allison realized the danger wasn't outside the house. It was already inside. What followed became one of the most disturbing 911 cases ever told. This is the babysitter's final call, a chilling mystery that still haunts Crestwood to this day. The small town of Crestwood was quiet on Friday nights. Families gathered for dinners, teenagers drove around looking for something to do, and the streets emptied early. It was the kind of place where people trusted one another, where doors were often left unlocked, and where danger felt far away. That night, however, a young babysitter named Allison Parker would learn that trust could be broken in the most terrifying way. Allison was 17 years old, a high school senior saving money for college. She was responsible and polite, the kind of girl neighbors trusted with their children. That evening, she had been hired by the Millers, a family who lived in a two-story house on the edge of town. The parents were going to a late dinner with friends, and they asked Allison to watch their two children, Emma and Noah. The house was large but cozy, with soft lights glowing in the windows. When Allison arrived, Mrs. Miller gave her a quick tour of the kitchen, showing where the snacks were kept, and explained the children's bedtime routine. Mr. Miller reminded her to keep the doors locked, just in case. Allison nodded, smiling, as she assured them she would take good care of everything. The Millers left, and soon the house was filled with the sound of children laughing. Allison played board games with Emma and read a storybook to Noah before tucking them both into bed. Upstairs, she checked the windows, locked the back door, and settled onto the couch with her phone and a textbook. It seemed like just another babysitting job. But then the phone rang. The house phone sat on the end table next to the couch. Few people used landlines anymore, and Allison was surprised to hear it ring. She picked it up expecting it to be the Millers checking in. Instead, there was silence. "Hello?" she said, her voice uncertain. For a moment, there was nothing but faint breathing on the other end. Then, slowly, a male voice whispered, "Have you checked the children?" Allison froze. Her eyes darted toward the staircase. The children were upstairs, asleep. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice shaking. But the line went dead. Her heart pounded. She told herself it had to be a prank. Maybe some kids from school had found the number and thought it would be funny, to scare her. She tried to calm down, sitting back on the couch, but she could not shake the feeling that something was wrong. Minutes passed. The house was quiet, too quiet. The only sound was the ticking of the clock on the wall. Allison glanced at her phone and thought about calling Mrs. Miller, but she did not want to worry her. She decided to check on the children instead. She climbed the stairs slowly, each creak of the wooden steps making her flinch. She opened Emma's room and found her sleeping peacefully, clutching her stuffed animal. In the next room, Noah was also asleep, his chest rising and falling with steady breaths. Allison sighed with relief, pulling the blankets tighter around him before stepping back into the hallway. Just then, the phone rang again. She rushed downstairs, her hands trembling as she picked up the receiver. "Who is this?" she demanded. The Yasi Shia, same whisper returned. "Why haven't you checked the children?" Allison's knees went weak. "Stop calling here," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm calling the police." She slammed the phone down and immediately dialed 911. The operator's calm voice answered, 911! What's your emergency? Allison explained quickly, her words tumbling out. She told the operator about the calls, about the whispering man, about the children upstairs. The operator listened carefully before asking her to stay calm. We'll trace the call, the operator said. Stay on the line with me. Allison nodded, clutching the phone tightly. Her eyes darted around the living room, searching the shadows. I'm scared, she whispered. It's going to be okay, the operator replied gently. Just stay calm. Do you see anyone outside? Allison moved toward the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to peek outside. The street was empty, the night still. No cars, no people, nothing but silence. Then the phone clicked. The line went dead again. She pulled the phone back to her ear, but there was nothing, just static. Her hands shook as she tried to redial, but before she could, the phone rang again. She nearly dropped it, her breath catching in her throat. She forced herself to answer, praying it was the operator, but it was the whisper again. I told you to check the children. Allison's eyes filled with tears. What do you want? She begged. But the caller hung up. She backed away from the phone, her mind racing. The children were upstairs. What if the man was inside the house? What if he had been upstairs all along? Her chest tightened as fear clawed at her throat. She grabbed her cell phone from the couch and dialed 911 again. This time, the operator stayed connected, promising that officers were on their way. Stay calm, the operator repeated. We're tracing the call now. Allison sat on the floor, her back against the wall, clutching the phone to her ear. Every sound in the house made her jump. The creak of the pipes, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant bark of a dog. Time felt stretched, each second longer than the last. Then the operator's voice changed. It was sharper, urgent. Allison, the voice said, you need to listen to me. The calls, they're coming from inside the house. Allison's breath stopped. The world seemed to spin. She stared up at the ceiling, her mind racing. Inside the house. Her eyes went to the staircase. Emma and Noah were still upstairs. The children were not safe. She wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Instead, she whispered into the phone. What do I do? The operator told her to leave the house immediately. But Allison's heart ached at the thought of leaving the children behind. She could not run. She had to protect them. She set down the phone, her hands trembling as she grabbed a heavy flashlight from the table. Slowly, she began to climb the stairs again, her ears straining for any sound above. The house seemed alive with shadows. Every corner filled with danger, and somewhere in the darkness, someone was waiting. Allison's legs felt heavy as she climbed the stairs, the beam of her flashlight shaking with her trembling hands. Every step groaned under her weight, and she feared the sound might reveal her to whoever was hiding inside. The air seemed colder, now the silence heavier, as though the house itself was holding its breath. She reached the top of the stairs and paused, straining her ears. The hallway stretched ahead, dim and shadowed, the doors to the children's bedrooms closed. She could hear Emma's soft breathing from behind one door, Noah's from another. For a moment, relief washed over her. They were still safe. But if the calls had come from inside, then someone else was there with them. Her heart thudded in her chest. She whispered to herself, "Stay calm, stay calm." The flashlight's beam moved across the hallway, catching family photos on the walls. Smiling faces, happy memories. None of them belonged to her. She was just the babysitter, caught in something she could not escape. She crept toward Emma's door first. Slowly, she turned the knob and pushed it open. The room was quiet. Emma lay curled under her blankets, her stuffed bear clutched tightly against her chest. Allison stepped inside, shining the flashlight around. Nothing moved. No shadows except her own. She closed the door quietly, her hand lingering on the knob as if she could protect the little girl by holding it shut. Next was Noah's room. She opened it carefully. The boy slept soundly, his tiny chest rising and falling. Toys littered the floor, a half-finished puzzle sat on the desk. Everything looked ordinary. Still, Allison swept the beam of light across the room. It touched. The closet door. Closed. She hesitated, her pulse racing. The phone call echoed in her mind. "Have you checked the children?" She stepped toward the closet, her hand shaking as she reached for the handle. She hesitated, listening. The silence was thick, broken only by Noah's soft breathing. She pulled the door open quickly, ready to scream. But it was empty. Only clothes, hung neatly inside, with boxes stacked on the floor. She exhaled shakily, closing it again. Allison returned to the hallway. That was when she heard it. A faint sound, the creak of floorboards, but not from her. From the other end of the hall, her breath caught. The house had betrayed her. She was not alone. She turned the flashlight toward the noise, the beam shaking, wildly. The hallway was empty, but she knew someone was there, somewhere behind one of the doors, or hiding in the shadows. Panic clawed at her chest. She wanted to run, but her legs felt like stone. The sound came again, this time from the staircase, behind her. A soft creak like someone shifting their weight. She spun around, pointing the light down the stairs. Nothing, only the empty living room below, shadows stretching across the floor. "Allison," a voice whispered. She froze. The voice was faint, but clear, coming from the darkness below. It wasn't the children. It wasn't the 911 operator. It was the same voice that had spoken on the phone. Her hand tightened around the flashlight until her knuckles turned white. Her instincts screamed at her to grab the children and run. She rushed back into Noah's room, shaking him awake. "Noah, wake up," she whispered urgently. His eyes fluttered open, confused. "Shh, it's okay. We have to go." She carried him into the hallway, then hurried into Emma's room, waking her as well. Emma rubbed her eyes, asking what was wrong, but Allison hushed her quickly. "Stay quiet. We're leaving." She guided them toward the staircase, her ears tuned to every sound. Each step they took felt like it echoed through the whole house. As they reached the top of the stairs, she froze again. The front door was wide open. Cold night air blew inside, making the curtains sway. Allison's stomach twisted. She knew she had locked that door earlier. Someone had opened it. She wanted to scream for help, but fear locked her throat. Instead, she gripped the children's hands tightly and whispered, "Stay behind me." Slowly, she led them down the stairs, the flashlight's beam bouncing across the walls. Halfway down, the house phone rang again. The shrill sound cut through the silence, making Emma gasp. Allison's heart hammered in her chest. She tried to ignore it, tried to focus on getting the children out. But the phone kept ringing, each ring louder than the last. She reached the bottom of the stairs. The phone sat on the small table by the couch, glowing in the dark. She didn't want to answer it, but some part of her knew she had to. If she didn't, the voice would never stop. She picked it up with a shaking hand. "What do you want from me?" she cried. The whisper came again, calm and cold. "Don't look outside. He's already inside." Her eyes widened. She dropped the phone, pulling the children toward the back door. Her hands fumbled with the lock, desperate to escape. She shoved the door open and pushed the children outside into the yard. Cold air hit her face, and for a moment, relief filled her chest. Then she heard it. Footsteps inside the house, heavy and fast, coming down the stairs. "Allison, run!" Emma cried. She grabbed both children's hands and sprinted across the yard toward the street. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her legs burning with fear. The children stumbled, but she pulled them forward, refusing to slow down. In the distance, flashing red and blue lights appeared. Police cars. Sirens wailed. Through the night, growing louder as they approached the Miller house. Relief surged through Allison like fire. They had made it out. But then she looked back. In the window of the house, framed by the curtains, she saw him. A man in the shadows, his face hidden, watching them run. He didn't move, didn't chase, only stared. The police pulled into the driveway, officers rushing out with guns drawn. Allison collapsed onto the grass, clutching the children to her chest as tears streamed down her face. She tried to speak, but all that came out was sobs. The officers swept through the house, searching every room, every corner. But the man was gone. The open door and the ringing phone were all that remained. Allison sat trembling as an officer, wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. Emma and Noah clung to her sides, their small faces pale with fear. The operator's words still echoed in her mind. The calls are coming from inside the house, and the shadow in the window proved it. The nightmare was only beginning. The police searched the Miller house for hours that night, but the man Allison saw in the window was nowhere to be found. Officers moved from room to room, opening closets, checking under beds, even crawling through the attic. They found no footprints. In the yard, no forced entry on the doors or windows, nothing that explained how the calls had come from inside. Allison sat in the back of an ambulance with Emma and Noah wrapped in blankets beside her. A paramedic checked her pulse and asked questions, but she barely heard them. Her eyes stayed on the house, waiting for the shadow in the window to return. Every time the wind moved the curtains, her heart skipped a beat. When Mr. and Mrs. Miller finally returned home, their faces went pale at the sight of police cars lined up in their driveway. Mrs. Miller rushed to her children, pulling them into her arms, tears streaming down her cheeks. Mr. Miller turned to Allison, his voice sharp with worry. "What happened?" Allison tried to explain, but her words trembled. The phone kept ringing. A man's voice. The operator said the calls were coming from inside. She glanced at the house. "And I saw him. He was in the window." The police confirmed her story as best they could, but without evidence. It was hard to prove. The phone records showed multiple calls made to the house phone, but the origin was unclear. It seemed as if the calls had bounced through different lines, making them difficult to trace. One officer muttered, "It's like he knew how to cover his tracks." Detective Harris, a tall man with tired eyes, knelt in front of Allison. "You did the right thing calling us. You saved those kids. But I need you to remember, did you see his face?" Allison shook her head. "No, just the shadow. He was tall. That's all I know." Harris frowned. It wasn't much, but it was something. The police escorted the Millers and Allison to a nearby hotel for the night, not wanting them to stay in the house until it was fully searched. But even in the safety of the hotel room, Allison couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every knock at the door, every ring of the phone made her jump. She barely slept, the whispering voice replaying in her mind. "Have you checked the children?" The next morning, Crestwood buzzed with gossip. Everyone in town heard about the babysitter's 911 call. Some people whispered about prank callers, others spoke of break-ins, and a few leaned toward something darker. "That house has always been strange," one neighbor said. "Maybe it's haunted." The police dismissed talk of ghosts, but they couldn't dismiss the facts. The calls had come from the house phone, yet no one had been found inside. Detective Harris ordered technicians to test the phone lines, looking for tampering. They found nothing unusual. Meanwhile, Allison tried to return to her normal routine, but it was impossible. At school, classmates bombarded her with questions. "Did you really hear a voice? Was someone hiding inside?" She didn't want to answer. But the story had spread too far. She was no longer just Allison Parker. She was the babysitter from the 911 call. At night, she couldn't sleep without the lights on. Every creak of her parents' house made her heart race. Sometimes the phone rang and she froze, afraid to answer. Once, she picked it up and heard only static before the line went dead. She dropped the receiver, her hands shaking. Was it him again, or just her imagination? The police investigation uncovered more questions than answers. They found fingerprints in the Miller house, but most belonged to the family or Allison. One partial print didn't match anyone in the system. They also discovered that the back door lock had been tampered with, not broken, but carefully picked. Whoever had been in the house was skilled, patient, and knew how to avoid leaving evidence. Detective Harris returned to speak with Allison a few days later. He asked her to describe everything again, every detail she remembered. She repeated, the story, the calls, the whisper, the shadow in the window. Harris listened closely, then leaned back in his chair. "This isn't random," he said finally. "He knew you were alone in that house. He knew the kids were upstairs, and he wanted you to be afraid." Allison shivered. "But why? Why me?" Harris didn't answer right away. He rubbed his chin, thinking. Sometimes it's not about who you are. It's about opportunity. He may have been watching the house for days, waiting for the right night. The thought made Allison's stomach twist. Had someone been watching her all along? Had he followed her there? Days turned into weeks, but the fear never faded. The Millers installed a new alarm system and cameras, but Mrs. Miller confessed she couldn't sleep without checking on the children every hour. "I keep hearing his voice," she admitted to Allison once. "I hear it in my dreams." Then one evening, the calls started again. This time, they didn't go to the Miller house. They went to Allison's phone. She was home alone, studying. In her bedroom when her cell phone buzzed. She picked it up without looking, expecting it to be a friend. But the whisper returned. "Have you checked the children?" Allison dropped the phone, her blood turning to ice. It wasn't possible. How had he gotten her number? She picked it back up with shaking hands, but the line was dead. Her parents rushed into her room when they heard her scream. She tried to explain, but they looked at her with worry, unsure if the stress was playing tricks on her. Her father called the police immediately. Detective Harris arrived within the hour, his face grim. He took the phone, checked the call log, and frowned. "Blocked number," he said. "No trace." Allison sat on her bed, hugging her knees. "He's not done," she whispered. "He's still out there." Harris placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll find him, I promise." But even he sounded unsure. That night, Allison lay awake, her phone clutched in her hand, waiting for it to ring again. The silence was worse than the call, and somewhere in Crestwood, a man smiled in the dark, a phone in his hand, planning his next move. The town of Crestwood could not stop talking about the babysitter's call. It spread from house to house, whispered in grocery stores, repeated at school hallways. Everyone had an opinion. Some believed Allison was the victim of a cruel prank. Others were certain it was more than that, something darker, something that wouldn't stop until the truth was revealed. The police felt the same. Detective Harris gathered his team in the small station downtown. On the board in front of him were photographs of the Miller house, the basement door, and the old landline phone. He pinned Allison's cell phone log next to them. 2 columns of calls, one from inside the Miller home, the other to Allison directly. Harris tapped the board with a marker. "This man is escalating," he said. "First, he wanted to scare her in someone else's home. Now he's reaching into her life directly. That means he's watching her. He knows her number, her schedule, maybe even where she sleeps." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. Allison Parker wasn't just a witness. She was the target. Meanwhile, Allison tried to live normally. She still went to school, still studied, but every movement was filled with fear. She jumped when lockers slammed, when the phone rang, when someone tapped her shoulder. Friends whispered about her, sometimes with pity, sometimes with doubt. Maybe she made it up, one girl said. She just wants attention. The words stung, but Allison stayed quiet. She knew what she had heard. Her parents tried to protect her. Her father drove her to school every day. Her mother checked the locks 3 times each night. But the tension inside their house grew heavier by the day. They wanted to believe the police would keep her safe, but even the police couldn't guard her every second. One evening, as Allison sat at her desk doing homework, her phone buzzed again. She froze, staring at the screen. A blocked number. Her breath caught as she answered. The whisper was back. "Don't hang up this time." Allison's hand shook. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. The voice chuckled softly. "You're good at watching children." "But who's watching you?" Her throat tightened. She slammed the phone down, screaming for her parents. Her father rushed in, but when he grabbed the phone, the line was already dead. Allison sobbed, trembling in his arms. Detective Harris came that night. He listened to her story, his face grim. "He's playing a game," Harris said, "and he wants you scared. That means he's nearby, somewhere close." The police placed a patrol car outside Allison's house. For a few nights, the flashing lights brought her comfort. But then the calls stopped. There were no whispers, no blocked numbers, just silence. And somehow, the silence felt worse. A week passed. The police began to wonder if the caller had moved on. People in town relaxed, convinced the nightmare was over. But Allison couldn't relax. She kept checking her phone, kept listening for footsteps in the dark. She knew it wasn't over. She was right. One night, while her parents were out shopping, Allison stayed home alone. The patrol car was still parked outside, an officer sitting behind the wheel. She felt safe enough to watch TV in the living room. Hours passed quietly. Then, around midnight, the house phone rang. Her chest tightened. Slowly, she picked it up. The whisper was sharper now, more direct. "You shouldn't be alone." Allison's eyes widened. She looked out the window. The patrol car was still there. The officer sat with his head down, writing something. But if the caller was inside the house again? She dropped the phone and ran to the door, waving frantically at the officer. He rushed in with his flashlight and searched the house top to bottom. Once again, nothing. No footprints, no intruder, no sign of forced entry. Only the echo of the call. That night, Harris called Allison into the station. He showed her a new report from the phone company. The calls hadn't come from a blocked number. They had come from a device, a modified phone that bounced signals and masked locations. "Whoever he is," Harris said, "he knows technology, and he's not stopping." Allison swallowed hard. "So what do I do?" Harris sighed. "We'll protect you, but you need to be ready. He's getting bolder, and he won't stop until he's caught." The words followed Allison everywhere. She tried to go back to babysitting other families, but she couldn't focus. Every creak of a house, every ring of a phone sent her into panic. Parents noticed her fear and stopped calling her. She was no longer the reliable babysitter. She was the girl with the 911 call. One evening, she met Emma and Noah again at the grocery store. The children clung to her legs, thanking her for saving them. Mrs. Miller hugged her tightly. "You're our angel," she said. But Allison didn't feel like an angel. She felt like prey. That night, Allison sat awake in her room, staring at her phone. Midnight came and went. Nothing happened. For a moment, she thought maybe the whispers were gone for good. She lay back in bed, closing her eyes. Then her phone lit up. She grabbed it, heart racing. Another blocked call. She answered, her voice shaking. The whisper came, low and menacing. "I'm closer than you think." Her hand shook so violently she almost dropped the phone. She forced herself to whisper, "Why me?" For the first time, the voice laughed, a soft, chilling sound. "Because you listened." The line went dead. Allison. sat frozen, staring at the dark window across her room. She couldn't see anything outside, but she felt it. The weight of eyes on her, watching, waiting. And she knew. The game was far from over. The next few days dragged by like a storm Allison could not escape. The calls did not come every night anymore. Sometimes there was silence, sometimes a message. That made it worse, because she never knew when the phone would ring. She could be brushing her teeth, doing homework, or sitting at the dinner table, and the thought pressed in. What if it rings now? Detective Harris visited her often. He carried a folder stuffed with notes, reports, and maps. He laid them out on the Parker family's dining table one evening. Allison and her parents leaned over the papers, trying to understand. "These calls aren't random," Harris explained. "He's not just scaring you for fun. He's planning something. Look here." He pointed to the phone records. "The timing isn't consistent, but it follows a pattern. Every week he waits until you're alone or late at night. He knows your schedule." Allison shivered. "So he's watching me?" Harris nodded grimly. "Yes, and we think he's been watching for longer than you realize." He pulled out an older report, one Allison had never seen. It was about a case from 5 years earlier. A young babysitter in a nearby town had also reported strange calls late at night. She told police a man whispered to her on the phone, asking if she had checked the children. Weeks later, she vanished. She was never found. Allison's throat tightened. "You think it's the same person?" "We can't prove it," Harris said, "but the similarities are too close to ignore. The voice, the words, the timing." Her mother gasped. "You mean this has happened before?" Harris nodded slowly. "And not just once." He showed them more reports, all about young babysitters in nearby towns. Missing, scared, gone. Some had made calls to 911, just like Allison. Some had described the same voice, the same whisper. Each time, the police searched but found nothing. Each time, the babysitter disappeared. Allison's stomach twisted. She wasn't the first. She might not be the last. That night she barely slept. Her dreams were filled with ringing phones and shadowy figures. When she woke, her pillow was damp with sweat. She sat up, staring at her phone on the nightstand, terrified it would light up again. At school, she felt the stares of classmates. Some were curious, others cruel. A boy leaned in close as she walked by and whispered, "Have you checked the children?" His friends laughed as Allison's face went pale. She ran into the bathroom, her chest heaving. The police kept watch outside her house, but even that did not bring comfort anymore. One officer admitted to her quietly, "If he's been doing this for years, he knows how to stay hidden. He won't slip up easily." The next call came 2 nights later. Allison answered with shaking hands, knowing she shouldn't, but unable to resist. This time the whisper was different. It was calm, almost mocking. "You're famous now," it said. "Everyone talks about you, but they don't know what I know." Her voice cracked. "What do you know?" The whisper paused, then replied, "I know you won't survive." The line went dead. Allison dropped the phone, sobbing. Her parents rushed in, but she could barely speak. Harris arrived minutes later, writing down every word. He looked older now, more tired. He admitted something he hadn't before. "We don't just think this is a prankster," he said quietly. "We think it's someone who has been doing this for a very long time. Someone who studies babysitters, someone who waits until the right moment." Allison's father slammed his fist on the table. "Then why haven't you caught him?" Harris's jaw tightened. "Because he's always one step ahead." The town of Crestwood grew restless. Parents stopped hiring babysitters. Families took turns watching their own children. Neighbors whispered that Allison was cursed, that trouble followed her. A few even told her parents to move away for safety, but moving didn't feel like a real option. Wherever she went, she knew he would follow. One evening, Allison sat on her porch with Detective Harris. The air was still, the sky filled with stars. Harris leaned back in his chair, his voice low. "He wants you afraid," he said. "That's his game. But people like him, they always want more. Fear isn't enough forever. One day soon he'll try to take you." Allison's hands trembled. "So what do I do?" "You fight," Harris said. "You stay ready. And when he slips, we'll be there." The words gave her little comfort. She went to bed that night with her phone clutched in her hand, her heart racing. Hours passed in silence. Then, at 3 a.m., her phone buzzed. She answered without thinking, her voice trembling. "Please leave me alone." The whisper was colder than ever. "Look outside." Allison froze. Slowly, she turned her head toward the window. Her curtains were open just an inch. Through the gap, she saw the faint outline of a man standing at the edge of her yard. Still. Watching. Her scream tore through the night. Her parents rushed into the room, but by the time they looked out the window, the man was gone. Only the empty yard remained, bathed in moonlight. The police searched the neighborhood, dogs sniffing through every yard and street, but found nothing. No footprints, no sign of entry, just silence. Allison sat in her room, clutching the blanket to her chest. The image of the man in the yard was burned into her mind. He wasn't just a voice anymore. He was real. He was close, and she knew the final call was still coming. The night Allison saw the man in the yard, something inside her changed. Fear had always followed her since the first call, but now it clung to her like a shadow. He wasn't just a voice anymore. He was flesh and blood, close enough to see her. Window, close enough to hear her scream. Detective Harris increased patrols in the neighborhood. Officers drove past the Parker house every hour. A cruiser sat on the street at night, its headlights cutting across the dark. But Allison knew it wasn't enough. The man had already proven he could appear and vanish without a trace. Her parents begged her to stay inside. She stopped going to school, finished assignments from home, and lived in constant watch. Her phone never left her hand, even when she showered or slept. She waited for it to buzz, for his whisper to crawl back into her ears. Some nights it did, other nights it didn't, and that made it worse. One afternoon, as rain fell softly outside, Allison sat at the kitchen table flipping through one of Detective Harris's reports. He had left it for her father, but she couldn't resist reading it. Inside were photos of other missing babysitters, their faces young and hopeful. Notes described the same pattern: late-night calls, strange whispers, then disappearance. The pages blurred as tears filled her eyes. She whispered to herself, "I'm next." Her mother overheard and rushed to her side, holding her tightly. "No, you're not. We'll protect you. You're safe here." But Allison could hear the doubt in her mother's voice. No one felt safe anymore. That night, just past midnight, the phone rang again. Allison answered with trembling hands. The whisper was calm, almost cheerful. "You looked scared last night. You looked beautiful." Her chest tightened. "Why are you doing this to me?" she begged. The voice chuckled softly. "Because you listen." The others stopped listening. The line went dead. Allison dropped the phone as if it burned her. The words echoed in her mind. The others stopped listening. Did that mean the missing babysitters? Had they all answered his calls until they vanished? The police searched the yard again but found nothing. No footprints, no evidence of anyone standing there. It was as if he was a ghost. But Allison knew better. He was real, and he was getting closer. Days passed, each one heavier than the last. The town grew restless, rumors spreading faster than the truth. Some people believed Allison was cursed. Others thought she was making it all up for attention. A few whispered that maybe she was involved somehow, though no one could explain how. The whispers hurt, but Allison barely noticed. She had bigger fears. Detective Harris tried to keep her focused. He set up recording devices in the house, hoping to catch the calls. He gave her a small panic button to carry in her pocket, linked directly to the police station. "You press this," he said firmly, "and we'll be there in minutes." Allison nodded, but she knew minutes could feel like hours. One night, just after 2 a.m., her phone buzzed again. She answered, her voice trembling. The whisper was softer, this time. "I'm in the house." Allison froze. She clutched the panic button and pressed it, her heart racing. She dropped the phone and ran to her parents' room, screaming. They rushed to lock the doors as sirens wailed in the distance. Police stormed the house minutes later, but once again, nothing. No broken locks, no open windows, no intruder. Only Allison's fear filling the walls. But on the living room table, they found something new. A Polaroid photo. It showed Allison, sleeping in her bed, taken from inside her room. Her scream echoed through the house as she clutched the photo. It was proof. He wasn't just watching from the yard. He had been inside. Detective Harris's face turned pale when he saw it. He's escalating. He's not just calling anymore. He's leaving messages. The Parker family refused to stay in the house after that night. They packed bags and moved into a motel on the other side of town, guarded by police. But even there, Allison didn't feel safe. What if he followed her? What if he already knew where she was? The calls slowed, but they didn't stop. One came to the motel room phone. Another came to Allison's cell while she was in the bathroom. Each time, the whisper was the same. "Have you checked the children?" One night, the whisper added something new. "It's almost time." Allison dropped the phone and sobbed into her hands. The weight of his words crushed her chest. She knew he was planning something final, something worse than before. Harris doubled the patrols, begged his superiors for more resources, but even he seemed worn down. He sat with Allison one evening at the motel, his voice tired but steady. "He wants control. That's why he calls. That's why he leaves messages. But the more he pushes, the closer he gets to slipping. We'll catch him. You have to believe that." Allison nodded, but deep down she wasn't sure. Every day felt like a countdown, and she didn't know when it would hit 0. Late one night, as she sat by the motel window, her phone buzzed again. She answered, her voice barely a whisper. This time, the voice didn't ask about the children. It simply said, "Look behind you." Allison spun, her heart in her throat. The room was empty, her parents asleep on the other bed. She turned back to the phone, but the line was dead. Her body shook as she crawled under the blanket, tears streaming down her face. She knew he was playing with her, breaking her down piece by piece, and she feared the next call would not be just a whisper. It would be the end. The motel room was quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner. Allison lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. She had not slept properly in weeks. Every sound made her flinch, every shadow seemed to move. She kept waiting for the buzz, for the whisper. It came at 2:47 a.m. Her phone lit up, vibrating in her palm. Blocked number. She almost didn't answer, but her trembling thumb slid across the screen anyway. Allison. The whisper breathed. Her heart stopped. He had never spoken her name before. "What do you want from me?" she whispered, her voice breaking. The man chuckled softly, a low, chilling sound. "It's time." Her blood froze. "Time for what?" The line went dead. Allison sat up, shaking, her parents awake. She tried to explain, but before she could finish, there was a sound outside the motel window, a scrape, a soft thud. Her father pulled back the curtain and froze. A figure stood in the parking lot, watching. The police patrol car outside turned its spotlight on the man, but by the time the beam hit, he was gone. Officers ran through the lot, but once again he slipped away. It was like chasing smoke. Detective. Harris arrived minutes later, his face pale and drawn. "He's escalating," he said, pacing the room. "This is what I warned you about. He's building to something final." Allison's hands shook so badly she could barely hold her phone. "He said it's time," she whispered. Harris clenched, his jaw. "Then we need to be ready." The next few nights were restless. Police rotated outside the motel, but no one could stop the calls. Sometimes they came once, sometimes 3 or 4 times in a row. Always the same voice, sometimes laughing, sometimes silent. Once, he whispered, "I can see you." Even as Allison sat in a room surrounded by officers, each call made her weaker. The fear ate away at her until she barely spoke, barely ate. She was living for the next ring. Harris grew more desperate too, setting up recording equipment, bringing in experts to trace the calls. But the man stayed hidden, clever and careful. Then came the night of the final call. It was storming outside, rain hammering the motel roof, thunder shaking the walls. Allison sat on the bed, her parents asleep beside her, the glow of her phone casting pale light on her face. At exactly midnight, it buzzed. She answered instantly, her breath ragged. "Please, stop." The whisper was calm. "I'm already here." Her eyes widened. "Where?" The line crackled. "Behind the door." Allison dropped the phone, her scream piercing the night. Her father leapt up, grabbing the nearest lamp as a weapon. Harris, who had been in the next room with 2 officers, burst in with his gun drawn. They rushed to the door, yanking it open. The hallway was empty, but on the floor just outside the door lay another Polaroid. Harris picked it up, his hands shaking. It was a picture of Allison, taken only minutes earlier, as she sat on the bed with her phone in her hand. Her mother gasped, clutching Allison close. "He was here. He was here." Officers swarmed the building, searching every hallway, every room, even the roof. Nothing. The storm drowned their footsteps. The rain washed away any trace. The man had vanished again, leaving only his calling card. That was the last time Allison heard the voice. The calls stopped after that night. The whisper was gone, the phone silent. But silence did not bring peace. Harris believed the man had grown bored or moved on to another target. Allison lived in constant fear, waiting for her phone to ring again, waiting for him to return. Every buzz made her jump, every blocked number made her sick. She carried the scars in her eyes, in her voice, in the way she never slept without. Lights on. The case remained open but unsolved. No suspect was caught. No fingerprints, no camera footage, no clear trail. Only whispers, Polaroids, and fear. Harris retired years later, admitting the case was the one that haunted him most. "We were always one step behind him," he told reporters. "He knew the game too well." As for Allison, she left Crestwood eventually, trying to start over, in another town. But the memory of that voice followed her. Sometimes, late at night, she swore she could still hear it. "Have you checked the children?" The story of Allison Parker became a legend in Crestwood. Parents warned their children about answering strange calls. Babysitters whispered the tale to one another, shivering at the thought of being alone in the dark. And some swore the man was still out there, choosing new victims, playing the same cruel game. No one ever knew for sure. But one thing remained true. Allison's final call was not just a 911 mystery. It was a warning, because somewhere a phone still rang, and someone was still listening. You've just seen another chilling story from the world of true crime, but there are many more secrets waiting to be uncovered. Subscribe to Crime Loom, and join us as we unravel more heists, mysteries, and untold legends. Don't miss what's coming next. Because in the world of crime, the truth is always stranger than fiction.